Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r slash malicious compliance. In today's episode, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen goes both ways. You keep having my time estimates? You're right, my estimates should be more reliable. I want you to always try before trying to figure out if it will work. Sure, boss man. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen goes both ways. My new manager at work is one of those people that absolutely has to be in control. Even when you're exceeding every scorecard measure, keeping you head down, not putting a toe out of line, she still asks you to come to a meeting room to discuss some minor issue or another. Recently, she pulled me into a meeting to discuss me being late from work. Protocol is to call in, say we'll be late, then submit a schedule adjustment request when we arrived. She accused me of not calling in or submitting a request, but was able to prove I did, only instead of leaving it at that, she insisted I now needed to call her and explain why I was late. That's not the process, I told her, and she said she was making a new one. So now I call her at 6 a.m. on her day off to let her know if I'm gonna be late. She also had a meeting with me because my scorecard for a stat was 99 out of 100, with a target of 50. She had to point out the 1 out of 100 I missed. She also did the same for a handling time issue, where I am hitting an average of 600 seconds with a target of 1500. She needed to tell me about a call I took too long on. Suffice to say, complaints have been raised to her manager. Following an incident where she was asked to follow up on something for me, and claimed if it's not in writing, it didn't happen, I've been asking for everything in writing and repeat that mantra back to her when she claims to have told me something. Last week, she asked me to see her after my call. I walked over and she wasn't there, so went back to my desk. She asked me why I didn't stay around, and I reminded her of the time she put, in writing, that I wasn't to spend more than 1 minute waiting for her if she asked to see me, and was to go back to my desk to take calls, not wasting time. She asked me to come over again, and when I did, she wasn't there. This repeated twice more before my shift was over. Each time I documented logged out at 14:14 and 35 seconds p.m., came to your desk, you were not there, spent 45 seconds waiting, returned to desk and took another call at 14:16 and 38 seconds p.m. in chat. She messages me to ask what time I finish. I tell her it was 2 minutes prior, and she says we can catch up now. I tell her that my shift if over, and ask if she'll approve an overtime pay for an out-of-hours meeting. She tells me not to be silly, and it'll just take 10 minutes. I refuse and say if I don't get paid, we can do it tomorrow when I am being paid. She's typing, then not, then typing, then not, choosing her words. I know she's angry at being challenged, and she decided to employ one of the tactics she used when she managed a team for a company where this was standard practice. Okay, well, if you'd like to go home now, I can always make it a formal meeting. A formal meeting where I work as code for a meeting with HR, documented on your record, for misconduct and repeated issues. She thinks she's won. Not a problem. Make a formal meeting, ensure I have 24 hours notice, send a formal invite, and I will bring a support person with me. I log out and leave, but not before grabbing screenshots and saving a copy of the chat logs. Next day, she's called my bluff and has a meeting scheduled. I send it to my union rep, and she comes in on the day. HR sits down with us and opens with, so we're here today to discuss some concerns. Your team leader asked you to attend an off-the-cuff catch-up 3 times, and for some reason you refused? I quickly clarify what actually happened. My manager claims otherwise, and I repeat her mantra if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. Then I supply receipts her demands to put things in writing, her chat, my timestamps, my call logs, and her message to me afterwards. My union rep stares at the two of them, with a small smile, and asks, so do you maintain the position that employees should attend meetings unpaid, and that misconduct investigations are a good use of resources if they refuse? HR said there may have been a miscommunication, and that I could return to work. I have it put in writing that I am not accused of any misconduct, and have been cleared of any false accusations, with nothing documented on my staff file. Yesterday, my team was advised that our team leader had decided to pursue opportunities outside of the company, and we were getting a new manager. You keep having my time estimates? You're right, my estimates should be more reliable. A couple of decades ago, I was working as the only technical writer in a fairly large team of developers. Our manager was Cambridge educated, liked to cut estimates, and was particularly convinced that my job was easy and quick, and that I was lazy and terrible at estimates. He'd point out that the worst typist could type a page of text in an hour, so I should be getting through at least 8 pages of user manual a day. When he halved my time estimates and gave me the new deadlines, I, like the doofus I was, slaved away, worked unpaid overtime, and squeaked on over the line. And then usually ended up taking a couple of days sick leave to recover. That eventually got me called into HR for being unreliable. Humph. Something in me snapped at that point. The next project, the same scenario played out. I gave my quite good time estimates, he poo-pooed them and halved them. I shrugged and accepted his pronouncement. He pointed out that I really needed to get better at estimating my time. MC time. 2 weeks before the end of the 2-month project, he asked for an update. "Oh, I'm a bit over a third of the way through the documentation," I said calmly, as though there wasn't a deadline staring me in the face. He blinked and asked for an explanation. "Well, I told you it would take 4 months to do the amount of documentation you asked for, and it looks as though if I don't do any overtime, it's actually pretty close to correct, based on my progress so far." I beamed at him as though I was completely unaware that he had managers and a CTO who were expecting my documentation based on the information he gave them along with the product it's describing, of course. Much to my surprise, it didn't even seem to occur to him to yell at me. The sheer confidence with which I delivered the devastating news had utterly confused him. He ended up helping me to cut down the requirements and then finish completing the documentation to meet the deadline. I worked my usual hours, and if he asked me to do overtime, played dumb and said, "No, sorry, I get sick if I do that, so I don't anymore." He worked a lot of overtime. I would walk past his office to see him staring at his computer monitor, biting his fingernails, and looking very, very worried. He wrote a lot of substandard documentation, and being a perfectionist, that really upset him. He didn't see his family much for 2 weeks. I spent a lot of my time at work trying not to cackle like a warlock who's had one too many pep pills. Once he had some time to recover, he called me into his office to discuss new ways of estimating time for documentation, and carefully suggested that maybe half a page to a page of documentation a day was a fair general estimate. Maybe? And perhaps at some point we should look at hiring a second tech writer. I want you to always try before trying to figure out if it will work. Sure, boss man. I'm still working at the same place and enjoying what I do, so my apologies that I will keep things a little vague. Bossman has since left though, which is why I'm sharing now. Please be warned, the fallout is extremely small, but it was to me a small petty win that I look back on fondly. The setup. At my workplace, every employee has 3 sets of duties. The first set of basic duties is the same for each and everyone, which is a prescribed number of hours per day for which we are rostered, with the total number of hours a week ranging from 10 to 28 hours depending on whether you are middle management or an ordinary employee such as myself. The second and third set of duties are highly varied, and are organized into various committees which an employee can technically change between every year. Some involve heavier working hours or planning, whereas others involve more menial, simpler tasks. As you may imagine, rostering the prescribed hours for employees must be a heavy affair, and there must be a committee to oversee it. My second set of duties happen to fall under this committee, and I help with the rostering, which is mainly done on a highly specialized and expensive software twice a year, with the committee managing substitutions whenever an employee is away on sick leave or other reasons throughout the year. Although it was my first job, I had been personally trained for 2 years by my predecessor in the committee, who was due to retire. At the time of the Malicious compliance, I have been a valued member for 3 years who have made noted contributions towards the rostering processes. Now on to the Malicious compliance. As usual, our story starts when a new boss came into our workplace, whom I shall call Bossman going forward. There are usually 2 or 3 bosses of equal standing above our middle management. Now Bossman fancied himself a people's person, who would often listen to the grievances of ordinary employees and try to find ways to change things such that ordinary employee satisfaction could improve. Now this would usually be a good thing, except that he would entertain unreasonable requests as well. This resulted in time wasted trying out untenable solutions, or situations where work was shifted around such that it became unfair to other individuals. As you may expect, this usually caused new grievances, and then work was shifted back to how it was originally allocated because that had been the most fair in the first place. We had to interact with Bossman quite frequently as some grievances had to do with rostering. As Bossman had had some experience in said committee in the past elsewhere, he fancied himself an expert in what we were doing. We frequently found ourselves explaining to him why certain grievances were unreasonable, and we could not accommodate the requests during rostering. Finally, it reached a point whereby he said something along the lines of, "I want you to always try before trying to figure out if it will work." Now, we work 5 days a week. One of the instructions he had given us, along with that ultimatum, was that one particular employee be prescribed no more than 4 hours a day, with a total number of 26 prescribed hours every week. Those of you mathematically inclined will see where the problem is. 26 divided by 5 is equal to 5 hours daily with 1 left over. There was no way we could follow his instructions unless the employee came in every day of the week. But oh well, Bossman wants what Bossman wants. None of us said anything to Bossman and proceeded to run the software, producing multiple failed rosters as the software could not produce a full roster for everyone. But man, did we keep trying. The fallout. Eventually, Bossman came to check in on us and our progress as we were behind schedule, since the roster also had to be vetted by middle management and managers were wondering why Bossman had not given the go-ahead for any copies of the roster. The manager for our committee, who's really awesome and tactful, informed Bossman that no full roster has been produced, as we were still trying to get the software to ensure that particular employee did not have more than 4 hours rostered per day. Bossman asked why was there a problem with that, which is when the manager reminded him that said employee had to fulfill 26 prescribed hours a week. Bossman was confused as to why we did not bring this up earlier, as it was clear that this set of conditions isn't logically possible. Manager tactfully reminded Bossman that he had given us these conditions along with the instruction to try first before trying to figure out if there were any problems with the conditions he had given us. To be fair to Bossman, he took it in his stride and approved the suggested changes we requested to the set of conditions he had given us on the spot. We delivered a satisfactory roster to him by the end of the same working day. For the remainder of the time he was with us, Bossman would actually listen if we proposed changes or protested to some of the unreasonable requests with regards to rostering without requiring us to waste time trying it out first. Clarification before some of you point out that the particular employee, who was supposed to have no more than 4 prescribed hours a day, is the one at fault. Said employee had actually requested to have lesser prescribed hours in a week, as an average worker usually has 20 prescribed hours a week, and it's only when we are extremely short-handed that a handful of workers go up to the maximum of 28 prescribed hours. This is so that we have time to complete our other 2 sets of duties as well, which are not counted towards these prescribed hours. For some reason, Bossman saw the solution as to reduce the number of prescribed hours per day, without lowering the total number of prescribed hours in a week.